And our last panelist today is Representative Elizabeth Hager, another stalwart legislator in New Hampshire. She served in the New Hampshire State Legislature for 13 terms. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. That was 13 terms, 26 years. I often wonder how I did it. But first of all, I want to thank Susan and the committee that put this great caucus on. I think this has just been the best day. And we're not even finished, but we also owe a round of applause to Risha for controlling us for that great caucus. And it was also fun to serve with her in the New Hampshire legislature because she knows just as much about strategy in the legislature as she exhibited in herding us all around this room. I also admire those of you who were able to capture the imagination of other groups and bring the groups together to do that, because that's something that has to be done continually. Had to. Do I have to put this in the past tense? Had to be done continually in the New Hampshire legislature. But I guess I also want to say that I'm so thrilled you're putting this conference on now, this caucus on now, today, because frankly, I'm pretty discouraged and I'm pretty befuddled. Dana, I had my earn third, I had my learn third, my earn third, and I have just retired from full-time employment, and I was kicked out of the legislature because I was a Republican, and the right wing really doesn't like me. They like me less than they like Democrats. And so I'm really thinking about the return part of my life right now more than usual. And the hatefulness and the bitterness and the partisanship in our nation's capital and in our state capital discourage me a lot. I'm so proud of Teri. I opened my newspaper this morning to see that she had criticized Speaker O'Brien rightfully for taking a constitutional amendment that the governor has put in. We have a process. We've had a process in the legislature that's probably a lot like it was when they wrote our Constitution. We don't make a lot of changes, but we have open hearings on bills. We get editorial writers like Jeff to weigh in on what they are. Now we've got bloggers that get to weigh in on what these things are about. And the legislature has to have an overwhelming vote of both the House and the Senate to vote on a constitutional amendment. And then it's one of the few things, because we're not a, what do we call it, state. We don't vote on everything as voters.
You're not a referendum.
We're a referendum state. Thank you, Risha. I knew you'd think of the word for me. We're not a referendum state. The one time, besides voting for individuals to hold office in this state, that we get to have a say is in the amending of our Constitution. And 2/3 of the voters voting on any issue have to say yes to have an amendment added to our Constitution. So Speaker O'Brien has decided he's going to call a special session, have no hearings, come in and vote in one day on a constitutional amendment, just because he's annoyed with our governor. So thank you, Teri, for standing up to him. But I sort of elaborated on that story for two reasons. Number one, things are so ugly right now that it's hard to really figure out how to make an impact. And it also has tended to silence people. So I'm sure Teri had to think very hard about whether it was worth it to say that about Speaker O'Brien. What he did makes no sense. It's ridiculous. And it seems to me that back in somehow the good old days, everybody would have been screaming at him, but we are so quiet right now about issues that we care about. But I can see why. I can also see why in the two people whose names have become publicly known, who were harassed by Herman Cain, they are being so vilely attacked day after day after day now that I wonder about stepping forward. So I'm supposed to be talking to you about action, but I'm really sharing with you more of my questions. And I'm really hoping that as you all follow up with all of us about this caucus and the issues we care about, that you also figure out a good follow-up about what we can do next. I'm ready to stand up. I'm not scared to stand up on issues that I care about. And I know what attacks are like because I've been in the public arena for so long. Actually, this is really a digression. The worst attacks on me ever in all the times I've run for office and other things I've done was when I volunteered to lead the street renaming committee in Concord. And our committee was going to change the names of some people's streets. And I was attacked for my moral principles. So you never quite know. But anyway, I'm used to it. You can see I still remember that, but I'm still used to it. But it needs, if people are willing to stand up and speak on the kind of issues that we clearly care about in this room, as we stood around and voted and did all we did today, there have to be people behind those of us who are willing to stand up. And we together, people like us in this room and the ones that Carlin just taught us about that we're going to be better about communicating with, we've got to figure out how to do it in a way that we really get listened to. And it may be in the social media that becomes the power behind the kind of things we do. So let's get that figured out about how we really make a difference on these issues. And I'm also glad, obviously, in questions, I know all the old routine ways that we've done it for all these years, and some of them are still perfectly valid, like Jeff shared with us about calling the newspaper and so forth. And let's see if we can't turn the tide, and when we speak up in a positive way, and bring more people with us to be positive. And hopefully this caucus is going to lead to that. Thanks, Melissa.
Great, thank you. Okay, great, thank you. And now I'd like to open it up for questions, comments. There are mics running around, I believe.
So diverse. It's really great. Oh, really?
There you go. And if you would introduce yourself, please, and if you want to direct your question to one of the panelists, feel free to do that.
Excellent. Excellent.
My name.
Wait.
My name is Barbara. I found all of your comments very interesting. If I may make a humble brag, my license plate reads vote. So when you see that one's for Teri. The question I have really is for Carlin. It feels when I turn on my computer, and I don't have all of the bells and whistles and things, like a never-ending onslaught. And I want to know how I pick and choose what I should be looking at. I just get so overwhelmed, and I'm sure many people do, that the thought of streaming your wedding or anything else is just too overwhelming. So I just wonder how you deal with all that information overload.
Oh, sure. And there's a lot of noise out there. I think I use TweetDeck on my computer to follow everything going on Twitter. And what it allows me to do is set up different columns for different things I'm interested in. So I follow over 1,000 people on Twitter. I can't keep track of what everyone's saying and still do my job and still go to school and still do all those other things. So I separate it out into things like hashtags and search terms. So, for example, a conference I went to a couple weeks ago had a specific hashtag. So I had a specific column for that because I was interested in it. It blocked out all the noise I wasn't interested in. I could focus on what was coming out of that stream. So there's different tools you can use to set up searches to just allow you to focus down to that smaller community. And I'll tell you, Facebook just made some really dramatic changes in how it's displaying content to you in your news feed. So something you're going to actually start seeing a lot of. What they basically did was pages now have to reach a certain threshold for engagement and comments before they even make it into your news stream. So you're going to be seeing actually a lot more of these niche communications because that's what's going to get the most engagement and comments. And people who are keeping track of how Facebook displays that stuff are hopefully going to be smart about how they start using it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of noise out there, and I think the first step is just in finding your people, finding those small niche groups of people who care about the same things you do, and then you can kind of just naturally like block out the rest. There are so many social media tools. I can't even begin to name them all. The big ones that, I pay attention to Google Plus. Google Plus is doing some really great things. It's a very small community right now, but they're doing things they're literally called circles in Google Plus, so you can categorize people based on things that you care about and communicate with them a lot easier. And personally, I think it's going to overtake Facebook. I really think that Facebook has peaked and we're going to start seeing it go down. So, don't try to focus on everything. It'll just drive you crazy, but do your best to use searches to narrow down your topics.
You need the mic. Here it comes.
Here it comes.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Shi Zhentong. I'm a sophomore in Caucus and have several comments and questions first three speakers. Firstly, about Kaylin, right? Your name?
Carlin?
Oh, sorry, Kaylin. About the social medias. Actually, first, after she said there's a lot of information, but a lot of this information are biased. So sometimes it will affect people's opinion if she she or he doesn't have a full kind of broad knowledge. She will be easily to led to a different directions. Mm-hmm. That's also part of the reason why China are forbidden for Facebook, because we use a lot of spares, right? Mm-hmm. The political ideas. Also, the second one is just about like Twitter and Facebook. Like famous people, they will have a lot of followers and fans, and can we do something like try to encourage these kind of famous people? They put something like about women's rights and make them more political. So because people, especially like students, like to follow this kind of person's ideas, like famous singer, something like that. That's my opinion.
Yeah. In regards to famous people, I wouldn't. There's always opportunities to try to persuade famous people to tweet for your stuff and things like that. But honestly, I would focus more on finding those smaller communities. And one way you can do this is by having regularly scheduled chats with those communities and all following a certain hashtag. So in the higher ed community, there's something called Student Affairs Chat. Every week at the same time, thousands of people from colleges that work in student affairs will get together and they'll just talk about what they're doing, and you're following a certain hashtag. And people are able to build their Twitter followers so quickly by participating in these types of chats. I mean, I've seen people amass thousands of Twitter followers within weeks from doing these types of chats. So really, I mean, you can get a famous person to tweet about something once, or you can get a focus group of thousands of people to tweet about something every single week. And it's a lot less effort to get that focus group than you might think.
I agree with that, but I just think these kind of famous people, like singer, actors, they could be a broad resource. Like they have broader social access to general people, that's what I mean. But thank you for that. Yeah. Also, one of the last things about the non-violent, sorry. Jamila, sorry, I don't pronounce your name.
No problem.
I personally pay a lot of attention to education, and I believe education is the best way for non-violence. So can we do something like to affect, I don't want to control, to affect their ideologies in education, like we can select a certain textbook and to not control, just affect people's opinion when they were little. For example, about Disney movies, we all know that Disney movies are biased, like about a lot of discrimination on women. But we still, as a little kids, we watch that when we're young. So can we do some changes about that? Like we make new fairy tales, not about this old one, because these old ones are historical and traditionally. Usually historical and traditionally, men's always superior to women. So can we make some new textbooks and new fairy tales for women? Sorry, I'm nervous.
Thank you.
That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment and your question. Maybe you should work on that. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. I think that a lot of the history of the use of nonviolent means has been lost to us in favor of really emphasizing the role of war and violence. And we do have this really rich history throughout the centuries. And there are people working on building those case studies because they hold a great deal of lessons for us on how we can, how we can learn from them today and make our own struggles more effective for a variety of objectives.
I think nonviolence just change from your mind, not physically. Like cure people's minds much important than cure your physical illness, like you're sick, something like that.
Thanks, Zhizhen. I think we're going to move to the back if there's some questions back there. And it is true that asking people to withdraw their obedience has implications on our education system, right? Because we... Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Donna Decker. I am the Women in Leadership Director at Franklin Pierce University, and I am so interested in everything that you said. But the thing that is triggering my question is something Elizabeth said about the hatefulness that's going on right now and the backlash and so on. So I have a very specific request for any of you, all of you. How do we fight the good fight, write the new fairy tales, do what we need to do to make women's lives better? And how do we teach students to do that, those of us who are in academia, when the backlash is knee-jerk and furious and painful? Can you give us some tips? What do you say? What do you do? Do you cry yourself to sleep at night and get up to live another day?
Sometimes. Maybe. Hopefully that doesn't have to happen. I don't know if you heard Teri mutter, yeah, many times. But that's why I guess I was presenting a challenge to us to talk more about it and figure it out and not just revert to silence. One way, obviously, is if you have women in leadership at Franklin Pierce, I'm assuming you have a pretty large support group there doing that. And I think working with others and not isolating oneself is really important when you're standing up for something that you believe in.
Can I say something?
I would just add to that. It is tough in this environment to put yourself out there. If I use the example that Liz was talking about with this current speaker who backlashes on anybody that disagrees with them. And most of the people that disagree with them disagree with their policies, disagree with what they're doing. They don't attack the speaker or the majority leader as individuals. But the result has been quite often over the last year, someone criticizes their policy and they attack the person that's criticizing. And as Liz said, which I see every day, unfortunately now in the legislature, what happens then is that that individual that was personally attacked, and I would say particularly this is even more true for women, because we're not quite as comfortable with that being out there and being, attacked that way. Men grow up in that competitive mode, and women often do not. And so I think it's more challenging for women often to put themselves out there. So we get out there, we put ourselves out there, we're personally attacked, and what happens? We retreat. And so what that means is it worked. What they did, their bully tactics, worked. They stopped the dialogue, which is what they wanted to begin with. And so one of the things that I would say to everyone in here is, as much as that may feel painful, don't shut up, because that is what they want. I'm not saying be disrespectful. I would never ask anyone to be disrespectful. I hope that I am not ever disrespectful. But I think we have to be assertive. I was in a conversation earlier today with obviously women of my age group, because they were talking about the consciousness raising sessions of a particular era. But you know what? That's almost like what we need again in the political arena, because what we need to do is to be assertive, to put forth our reasons for the policy position that we are taking, and to do it forcefully and respectfully, and to demand that we have a dialogue about these issues, a real dialogue about these issues. So I would say to you, if you put yourself out and you're slapped down, don't take it, stand up again, and keep your voice speaking.
I just wanted to add one other thing. It's true that the political discourse in New Hampshire and in Washington is like really just unbearable at this point. It's disrespectful, it's angry, it's bitter, and it's also ignorant in many cases. But something to remember is something that both Teri and Liz were saying earlier, is that, you know, I spent just a little bit of time on Thursday up in the gallery at the House of Representatives in Concord, and I looked down and I noticed a portrait. There's all these portraits of these men, all in the back there, you know, George Washington and all the others, Abraham Lincoln and everything. And in the corner right near the gallery is this portrait of a really what I know that Teri and Liz and Risha know. It's a wonderful woman named Carolyn Gross, who was a majority leader for several years. And I was up there with a couple of other reporters who've been around as long as I have, like 30 years. And I said, how did they get that up there? And they said it was a big battle, because the people here in power today had they just thought it was crazy to put this, God forbid, moderate Republican, which I don't think exists anymore, Liz. Woman. That's even more, exactly. I think it had less to do with, I really do have to tell you, I think it had less to do with her gender than her politics, but that could be argued. But my point is that these people don't want to even harbor any dissent, even if it's from a woman who's unfortunately been gone for a while, and they don't even want to look at a portrait of her. But the other point I just wanted to say was that they're only there because people voted for them. And other people didn't vote for other people. That's why they're there. I was working on election night in 2010, and I saw the results coming in, and it was really scary seeing some of the people who have gotten elected to the House of Representatives and the Senate in New Hampshire. And that's only because people didn't vote. Yeah. You know, you could say, oh, I just don't want, I'm tired of these people, I'm tired of it. But you know, if you don't vote, there's a certain point where you can't criticize them anymore, because they're the ones who got the votes. Mm-hmm. And there are people in that House today who've been running for 10, 15 years, they never got anywhere. They never were elected to anything, but because there was such this massive wave came in November of 2010, they got swept in too. A couple of them had to resign because they were so like out of whack with reality. But really, no, really, the people in this room are like we're all responsible for the people who are in elective office. If you don't work, if you don't fight against them, if you don't work against them and get good candidates for yourself, then really at the end, we really can't complain. I mean, we can complain about what they're voting on, but at the end, they shouldn't be, you know, all odds are many of them should not be reelected in 2012, but we'll have to remain to see what happens then. But that's my point.
Hi, I'm Margaret Wylie. I have a comment and a question for Jamila. I think Jamila was way too modest about the work she's done. She works with Gene Sharp, who's writing From Dictatorship to Democracy, was the intellectual fodder for the Arab Spring. They've done phenomenal work in peaceful nonviolence, and we hope to have their movie soon at Colby Sawyer, How to Start a Revolution, which was wonderful. And my question is, one of the things I really liked about How to Start a Revolution is it had so many little common sense things. When you want to start a revolution, what do? You wear colors, you have symbols, and you put the women and children out front. I don't know how I feel about that, but I love that it was so straightforward. So Jamila, everyone look at her. My question for you is, how can we practice peaceful nonviolence with our state legislature? Colors, symbols, women out front. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for those kind comments.
Because they are armed, by the way.
Yeah, so I've heard. In fact, they're allowed to bring their weapons.
That
into
was the first thing they
House.
passed, the new
Yeah.
crew.
It's interesting. Your question is an excellent one, and it's one that's very difficult for me to answer because I don't know the situation well. And the basis of this work is that it really requires a very detailed understanding of the situation and the issues that are at stake, and the opposition as well as the opponent, and the weaknesses and the strengths of both sides. And so I think some of you might be better to answer that question. Thanks for your comments about the film. I have a copy with me, and so we're very pleased to have it shown here. And thank you for viewing it.
Also, I was sitting next to her. She just recorded a TED Talk, so you can find her. How many days ago?
It was a couple of weeks ago, TEDx San Francisco, and it's on YouTube. So, yeah. Thanks.
Up front.
A TED
Up
Talk,
front.
oh sorry, I'll just quickly explain. TED Talk is a very short, supposedly dynamic talk on a specific topic. And if they're good, they can be viewed tens of thousands of times, and if they're not so good, they tend to go away. So anyway, mine is up there. And it's meant to be on your own with no notes and on a stage. So it was about this topic. Right, you could do a search for my name, or you could speak to me. I could tell you how to
Do a search for TED, T-E-D. It's a site for public intellectuals. It's about ideas that matter. Wow. So you'll find some great. I don't know where the question came from, but you'll find some great clips for just TED.
Thanks. Can I just say one more thing about the Arab Spring and the use of our writings? There's been a lot reported in the press about how Gene Sharp's writings were actually useful for people planning the struggle. And a lot of what you see was, mass demonstrations, but for probably at least a decade or not more before that, there were people behind the scenes that were studying these writings in order to guide what they could do. And there were groups, and these included using methods, the speaker there spoke about different methods that were discussed in the film, but really what's more important is that these were groups that were building the institutions that later served as a basis not only to strengthen the population, but served as a basis of resistance. And if that can happen in a closed society like Egypt, then I say that there's a great deal of lessons that we can gain from those in our own society, where we actually have those institutions, a lot of them being independent. And if they're not independent, then how do you create new ones? And that can be a very, very important empowering process, and also serve when things get really bad. How do you actually use them to make massive change? And that was hugely helpful for the Arab Spring, and that's and in the ongoing struggles taking place.
Hi, my name is Susan Bartlett, and I have some questions for Dana. I'm very interested in this whole issue of micro-enterprise development, and I work with resettled refugee women in Manchester in a very small project, economic development project. And the first thing is, what kinds of businesses do you support? And also, how did you cultivate the collaboration and leadership within the women's community in Ghana? And also, what supports, what sort of educational supports were there for the women in terms of economic literacy and basic literacy? Thank you.
Could you repeat the question? No.
I'm sorry, it was a mouthful. I'm sorry.
The first one was?
What sort of businesses?
Yes, okay. They're all entrepreneurs. They all have small businesses that they can visually see and figure out. They start simple, selling goods, generally, where there's a market. It's called the local economy. So there's a need for yams every night, because that's the staple. So they'll sell yams, and they're very easy to buy, and they figure out where to buy them cheaper and where to get, and then they expand to cooking the yams and selling the cooked food. And then they go to a service of hairdressing, and then they can go into dressmaking. There's training actually in the village for those. Girls get training, so they get trained, and the better ones survive and do well. So it's all called the local economy. And the reason they have to stick to the local economy is they cannot take the risk of going to a market they don't know, because if they miss one day of income, they don't eat. So there's a new book, The Stealth of Nations, that was just released this month or 2 months ago, that talks about this local economy around the world. It is huge. So it's an entrepreneurial drive that is behind all the businesses.
And you've seen women progress actually from yams up into...
Well, you do see them progress. Some don't. And the loan will help them stabilize their income. They don't buy things on credit, so they immediately make more profit. They do well. But the ones that get it and then start using our counseling, our business counseling service, they come in and say, this isn't selling well. What should I do? And we help them figure out what they could expand to, and what is a future market that's a local market. We also have larger loans, and the good people who have the smarter ones with more drive will get a loan. They'll go to our Entrepreneurs Club, and that was funded by the UN African Mothers Association. So it's a larger loan that goes from $500 to as high as once $5,000. A baker had a fantastic business. She wanted an oven that would produce more product. In our agreement with her, she has to hire women who are not working, who are struggling. She brings them in, pays them a salary, teaches them the business, and then she brings them down for their loan. So there's a self-fulfilling piece to this, and the best ones climb out. We don't have anyone we've taken to the banking community. They all have bank accounts with our program, but very few have gotten a bank loan. Those are very rare in Ghana. And next question.
Oh, I guess also I was wondering how you cultivated the collaboration with the women and also built trust between yourselves and the communities.
I think the key is that we work with local people. We are not agents who come in with a big micro-lending program and come from afar with expecting them to show up on a Friday, dangle money in their face, require that they put money into the account. They don't call it collateral, they call it savings. And then they charge interest on their savings. So these big organizations come swinging into town and really disrupt things. We go slowly. We are there and open every single day. It's run by local people. We have teeth in our program. We collect. Our collection rate, our repayment rate is above 90%. That takes a lot of effort. We have a terrific woman who's been with us a long time, who's been to this city, town. And also she went to SNHU in the micro-development program. And so we work with local people. They've been with us a long time. They really know their stuff.
Right.
And they know the women, and there's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we come back. We keep coming back. This was my 22nd trip this year. And another fascinating development is the whole town is changing because the microloans, we keep coming back. We're not called, they hate the drive-by NGOs. The people who come into town, say, we have the best idea for you. We have it all. We're going to measure the results, and they leave. It's a terrible situation. There's huge backlash against people coming over with ideas and not sticking around. So the men are changing. I cannot tell you. I was stopped on the street by 2 young men. I've known them, one since the first trip, and another we learned to respect each other in the building of a school where he represented the government, and he kept saying, we'll write a letter. And finally, the head of the school said, we aren't writing any more letters. They do no good. And I'm standing there, go, Felicia, go. And so the men stopped me on the street and said, we have watched you, Dana. We are starting a community development association of our own. We are forming it. We've already had 2 demonstrations. We are standing up to government. We meet every Saturday night. I said, can I come? and it's incredible. The older people aren't making change happen. So we have impact there. And it's working with local people and then coming back, fulfilling our commitments. If something doesn't work, we edit it, and when it does work, we expand it. We have pilot programs. If they really do work in a small scale, we'll figure out how to expand it. And then you had one last question.
The supports for the women, the educational supports, is that something you provide, or you?
Really important.
Yeah.
Really important. You cannot just have scholarships. It's complex to keep a girl in school and get her to become an advocate for herself. She has lots of forces against her. And the first force against her are parents, because the parents need her to work. So we now have a program where we work with the parents right from the start in getting their cooperation. Last time I was there, we had a scholarship ceremony, which Wilma organized. We have 2 co-directors of our education program. We handed out personal envelopes saying it officially notifies that you have a scholarship. We did it in public. We required that a parent come. And more than half the parents who came were men. They are showing, they would never have shown up 8 years ago, 6 years ago. They would have been embarrassed against it. Now they're for it. But what was making us successful is the integrated piece, the enrichment, the leadership, the imagination piece, the going to the computer cafe, the learning about technology. We really are organizing them to feel like their own advocates. And you should see the difference between a girl who starts and then 3 years later I see her and she's in a group setting and we're having like a task group where we're asking opinions about a program. Oh my God. It is like the posture, the way they listen to the question, the way they formulate their thought and present, and then they tell the young girls who aren't speaking up, sit up, speak, it's your turn, you've got to make your point. So it's just this community uplift.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
And I saw a hand over. Can we get a microphone up front, please? Oh, and in the middle in the red. Where are the microphones? Okay. Right there.
Oh, no, I guess not. Get that one over there. We just pointed.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Reynolds from New London. My question is for Jamila, but also anybody. Would you speak to it? Be willing to give us an opinion about the Occupy Wall Street movement? I'm a dinosaur. I have not heard any news since early this morning.
You still have me beat.
But I'm worried about Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I actually knew it was coming because these days I've been doing a whole number of speaking engagements, and it's really on people's minds. How does this apply to us, and how do we make sense of what's happening in our own streets? I've visited the Occupy Boston movement a couple of times. They actually showed how to start a revolution in the square, beamed up projected onto one of the buildings. I mean, it was really powerful scene to see scenes of the Egyptian struggle there in the midst of all the camp and the tents and all of that. Really, really powerful. I think, again, this does really require a really detailed understanding of the Occupy movement, its origin, what the objectives are. And so I'll just say in general, I think that clearly it's a display of extreme dissatisfaction, and I think people are recognizing that change from within the system perhaps is not possible, and that they need to use more extreme measures to at least express their anger. And that's what you see, I think, in these various cities in the U.S. and in North America, and actually abroad as well. I think what is important for the movement, and right now I'm not aware of whether there's any leadership that exists, and I think they're very clear that the way decisions are made are based on consensus, which, though, is a very nice idea. I think it's probably in some ways inefficient and difficult to really get anything done. So in terms of any leadership, I think that there needs to be some consensus or some decision that they develop a strategy or identify what it is that they are looking to do beyond just express their dissatisfaction. I personally don't see much of that yet. But I think that something very important and significant is taking place. And I think that's how these movements do begin, is to really identify an issue on which there's overwhelming and widespread support. And in other places that we've seen, like, for example, in South Africa, where economic conditions were very, very bad, people recognized that just sort of bringing down, and this was during the apartheid struggle, bringing down the apartheid movement was not possible. The apartheid regime was not possible. So what they did was they developed, based on the problems in one specific township. What are the issues that are important to us? What's an issue on which there's widespread support and on which we can win? And that issue was water, clean water. And they said, you know, our children are dying, people are getting sick, and this is terrible. So they organized just on that one campaign. And it happened that they were successful, that the government backed down and did provide clean water. And I think that that's something we ought to think about now with the problems that we face. Some of them do seem overwhelming, but there are issues on which we can start small and on which we can win. And that does a lot in bringing in new people into the movement, and also from both people that are supportive but who are too afraid to act or don't really know where the movement's going, and people from the opponent groups, whether that's the regime or whether that's the corporations or whatever, and can help build confidence in the movement. And I think at this point, when I was at Occupy Boston, what I really saw was the strategy was how to stay in the square, how to maintain a presence there. And if you do that, then I think you lose sight of why are you even there in the first place? I mean, winter's coming. We have to wonder, is this really sustainable? And what else are people going to do beyond just showing their dissatisfaction? But there are resources available. That's the good news. And I think it's really important to know that there are analyses that can help you understand how a technique like this operates in a democracy, if in fact that's what we have here, when you do at least have very, very strong institutions.
I love your advice, because I think the first thing they've done, it encourages me, is they have not backed away through all the criticism. So if they'll take your advice and find the issues they need so that something can really happen, it's pretty exciting.
Great, thank you. And was it Carolyn? Would you pass the mic to the woman on your right, please? Oh, you don't have the mic, okay. Can we get a mic? Thank you. You've had your hand up a long time.
First of all, I want to say I've been to many, many conferences all my life, and I've rarely been to one where every single speaker, what did it sound? I've rarely been to one where every single speaker was good and relevant and articulate, and I think it's wonderful. We've had such a great group here. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I have 5 specific suggestions that I'd like to offer of things that we might do, and I'd like your opinions as to what you think is effective. First, as I say, at the risk of being like a broken record, I want to wave this latest issue of the New Yorker. There's an article in it entitled Birthright, which is about Planned Parenthood, it's about reproductive health, it's about abortion, and it's also about political strategies and how they work. So suggestion number 1, get this, read it. Suggestion number 2, write a short, very short letter to the editor of the New Yorker saying what a wonderful article it is, because it's totally accurate and it is very, very good. Number 3, write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. I know pledges are suspect in New Hampshire, but I've made a little pledge to myself that every month I'm going to write some sort of a little letter, short, to some newspaper somewhere local, Concord, Hanover, Intertown Record, whatever, about some issue that's important, and I would be interested in knowing how effective you really think that is. I'm never quite sure whether you want a letter on an issue or recommending a particular candidate, but it's one thing that every one of us could do every month with no great difficulty at all. Fourth, if you want media attention and want anybody to notice you today, it has to be visual. You have to make it something they can take a television picture of. We had a pigmobile that ran through New London with a pigmobile illustrating the size of the Defense Department budget compared with everything else. It got a lot of photographs and publicity. Occupy Wall Street is visual. We've got to be creative about being visual about what it is we do, I think. And my 5th point is, I've worked in the field of reproductive health for 50 years. I started in 1965 when I wrote a speech on the subject for Senator George McGovern. And at that point, every single Planned Parenthood and health organization in the United States had a clergyman's committee, a religious advisors committee that would come up and speak about how important it was from an ethical, religious, moral point of view to provide reproductive health. Something has happened to those clergymen's advisory committees. They don't seem to exist anymore just to promote women's reproductive health. From what I've read in the newspaper, one reason the Mississippi Amendment on Parenthood was turned down was the clergymen got together and denounced it. So I ask all of you, can you go and talk to your local minister, clergyman, probably not Catholic priest, but I don't know, maybe so. Can you talk to every single one of them and see if we can get them onto this issue? Because without their support, frankly, especially these days, we're a lot weaker. So those are my 5 specific suggestions for what we, all of us right here in this room, could do. And I wonder what you think might be most effective and whether you think any of these things would work. Thank you.
I'd like to make a 6th suggestion to that. And okay, so you guys have got a giant community in this room right now, right? Who's going to go online and make the New Hampshire Women's Caucus Facebook group after this is over? Every single one of you should go join that group. Every single one of you should go start blogs about issues that you care about, because I suspect a lot of you care about the same things. Every time you post a blog, post it to that group. Every single one of you should go and start a Twitter account today. Doesn't matter, don't get over the whole thing of I don't know what to say on Twitter. Every single time someone posts a blog post in that group that you care about, tweet it out. You guys have got a giant community right here. Pretty soon, you're going to start getting followers. You're going to start promoting each other's stuff. That's how this stuff happens. And Jeff said, one of the ways to get attention in the media is to call reporters. But, I'll tell you a quick story. Seth, the guy who said, if you don't like streaming, you don't care about your community, he wrote a blog post last week about how Google Apps are going to change education and the way it functions in this company. Just a simple blog post. There was nothing visual about it. It was pretty passionate. It was very wordy, and, he made a lot of good points. But it's going to be, he's going to be covered in the U.S. News next week because of that blog post, because the community tweeted it out for him and someone from U.S. News saw it. So, use all the people you've got here in this room today to get your issues out one step farther than what you can individually do.
You'll also be glad to know that somebody's already taken your advice, and the NARAL annual Roe versus Wade recognition is going to be on January 25th, and it's going to be people of faith. And that's going to be the theme about it. So also invite your local ministers to that.
And I really like the idea of writing a letter to the editor every month. I think that even though fewer people are reading newspapers, they're still reading the letters to the editors if they are reading the newspapers. And if you take that letter and add it to your Facebook page, add it to the New Hampshire Women's Caucus chat group every month, then that also will encourage others to do that. And I would say the policy issues, you said, do I write about policy or do I write about candidates? And I think the election season is actually relatively short. So most of the time you can write about policy. Once you educate people about the policy, then at the time of the election, you can say, support this person because they support this policy.
I just want to add a thing about the letters to the editor, because I think they are effective, even though fewer people are reading newspapers. Thanks for pointing out, Teri. Thank you very much. But I do think that they're well read by certainly people in public life and politics. They read the letters to the editor. I know they do. They're always looking to see what people are thinking and what they're saying. So I think that's where they're most effective. The other thing I want to say was, just in addition, that it's a good idea to write to your local papers, but also there are certain issues you can write to other papers outside this local area and around the state. And to find a list of daily and weekly newspapers in New Hampshire, you can go to this website called usnpl.com, and you can click on New Hampshire, list all the newspapers, and I believe they have links to their websites on it. But you can find all the newspapers in New Hampshire, and you might just might see some in an area that's kind of close here, or maybe get inspired to write something about maybe a statewide issue or an international or national issue, whatever. But it's usnpl.com.
I would add just one thing about the letters to the editor, and that is that to think about the tone of the letter. We've had conversation already up here about the tone, and I know that sometimes I cringe when I'm reading a letter from somebody that shares my view, but they share it in such a way that I'm embarrassed that they share my view. We don't want to be screaming at people, and I think that kind of turns people off anyway. So again, I would just say be respectful, be assertive, be factual, and just keep writing them.
And be brief.
Yes, and be brief.
Yes, please.
Great. Right here, up in front.
I have a quick comment and question, sorry. Just on the note of writing letters to the editor, as newspapers are more accessible online, there's a comment section on the letters to the editor, and so if you can put your comment out there and you can comment on the news articles, people are reading the comments and are accessing newspapers online. And then I just have a quick question for Jeff. As the media becomes more polarized, especially with, you have Fox News and you have MSNBC, and then you have that polarization I find gets disseminated down to local news stations. How do we combat that, and how do we get our message out in a way that is not so polarized?
It's a really good point you raised. We could have a little conference about that. That'll last all day, too. But I think part of the problem in the media environment today is that there's certain outlets that are calling themselves news channels that aren't. They pretend to be, and they don't really offer news, and they disguise it. They call it news, but it's not really news. It's pushing an agenda, whichever one you want to talk about. I think one way to do it is to just actually try to ignore them.
Stop watching.
And that's one way to do it. That sounds maybe naive because there's so many millions and millions of people watching that stuff, but I think, eventually for your own sanity, actually, you should stay away from ones that, in particular, that say they're fair and balanced and are nothing like it. I won't mention any names. But something else that is important to remember is one of the problems we have in this country in particular, but probably all around the world, but I'm just familiar with the United States, is that we have a very low media literacy quotient. People just accept what they read or hear, and that's it. And I think it's something is to educate not just ourselves but other people about what is out there on social media, in the mainstream media, or wherever you see it. It's important to educate yourself and to work to educate other people. That's something that people in this room should do also. I have no problem telling people that they should not watch Fox News because you're not getting what's going on in the world. I say that to people. I don't have a problem with it because I know that they don't practice real journalism on that, because I've been a journalist for 35 years and I know what real journalism is, and it's not what's on that channel. And there are newspapers that don't practice real journalism, but for the most part, it's the electronic stuff that's really insidious. There's nasty talk, and you mentioned something about commenting to letters on an editor online. That's one of the places where there's some of the nastiest discourse in the world is responding. I can't believe the stuff people say. You would never say that to someone's face, what people are writing in these comments. And I don't understand why people think it's a good idea to say nasty, just mean and vicious stuff because someone has the audacity to disagree with you. It's just crazy. I don't know if I answered your question because it is a very difficult question to approach, but I do really think it starts with really understanding what media you're using, what media you're reading and hearing, because that's part of what you need to do in educating yourself and also the people around you about how to approach media.
Thanks. Over here we have...
Hi, my name is Stella Safari, and I'm a student at Dartmouth College. First of all, with all due respect, Miss Dana, I just found it very, very problematic that, the thought of you waking up one day and deciding, I'm just gonna go help a village in Africa, and I totally understand where that is coming from, but as an African woman, I just find that very problematic. And I guess my question and comment, first of all, I understand a lot of women who are in that privileged spot are inclined to go to places like Africa where it seems like it's much easier to just help and to create change. But I would like to personally also encourage anyone who's thinking about that, which I think is a great thing to want to help and do good things for the world. But I feel like I would also encourage doing similar things in places like inner city places here in America, because I feel like oftentimes, it's easier to go to those distant places and those distant people where we have people who have those similar needs in America. But that's a personal thing. Anyway, I would like to also ask a question to Teri about how, as as women, how we can, and as women who are growing up in this globalized world, where we do get all this information about what's going on in places, in developing world especially, how we can advocate on behalf of those people in through the government, through the United States government, because the United States does have a lot to do with the conditions of those countries. So if you can speak briefly on that.
Yeah, I would say, though, that you want to use a lot of the same tools that we use to advocate on behalf of any issue here. It may be different people with whom you're advocating. For instance, there's less likelihood, not no likelihood, less likelihood that a state legislator would be, whose job it is to affect state legislation, is going to do something that impacts global. However, even as a state legislator, I'm part of a national organization of state legislators, and I co-chair a task force on international relations, and we're looking at ways, because many countries are about the size of some of our states, and their economies are about the size of some of our states. And so we're looking at ways that we can, what role a state-level government can play internationally as well. But you had somebody like Annie Custer here this morning who is running for an office where our international, she really would have a say in our international policy. And so having conversations with our federal delegation, being out and campaigning and supporting candidates for the national level that support your views, having conversations with them about it, I think would be really, really important.
Okay, I just wanted to say that it's occurring to me that we talked about safety in numbers and the importance of a positive, nonviolent message, and that one way we could just, put our toes in the water and get going is if everyone in this room wrote a letter to the editor about what a amazing day this has been and how lucky we are to have all these panelists and this college here and the New Hampshire Women's Caucus. And that would just put it out there that there is a group of people that really do care about positive, progressive change in New Hampshire. And with everything that's been happening with the legislature lately, it can seem as if there's not. So it might be a way to just say, hey, we're here.
Yeah. Good. I know about 150 people, 125 maybe people in Concord that would be very happy to hear that.
Are there further questions? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Carol Bunk, and I wanted to ask Ms. Norelli and Ms. Hager, it seems to me there's a split in the women's movement right now. You have women like Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin coming up and trying to co-opt feminism and saying, I'm the feminist in the room, where I know we all have a different idea of what feminism means, but I guess I always thought it meant the right of a woman to make her own choices. And when you have Michelle Bachmann talking about being submissive to her husband, and Sarah Palin saying, well, when I was pregnant, I made the choice to carry my pregnancy to term, and now you have to make that same choice. So she's taking our choice away from us if we don't make her choice. And how come these women are getting such spotlights when they have such a specific constituency that seems to me almost out of the mainstream, but they're the ones making the news and making headlines? And where are the Democratic women? Where are they? I guess that's kind of, what do you think about that?
I think Jeff should answer. Why do you pay so much attention to those two broads?
I don't know about, well, actually, it probably is true that they are broads. I don't know. I do read my pulp fiction, my pulp from the 40s and 50s. So, but anyway, yeah, well, that is a good question. And it says a lot about the state of the Republican Party today, doesn't it? Because that's their idea of what women and feminism are, and I really do believe they actually believe that, and it's like I said about journalism, I know what it is and I know it's not that. I mean, it's just it's part of the way they do politics. They steal slogans and phrases and words, and they use it and twist them around and make, steal things. That's like several years ago where was it Glenn Beck using Dr. King, which was one of the most repulsive things I've ever seen in the public stage, and same kind of thing.
I also think you partly answered your own observation by saying that they represent such a minority, that's why I turned to the media representatives here, because I don't think either one of them are going to get anywhere electorally, but they sure are getting an untoward amount of media attention.
I mean, I think there's also an element of controversy here. I mean, people love controversy, and I can tell you, just from, taking issues aside for a moment, the blog posts that I write that get shared the most have extreme subject lines. Things like, everything you know about Facebook is wrong. I had that blog post shared more than anything I've ever written. And the content wasn't extreme. It was just about Facebook changing the way they're working things. But people will share stuff that have extreme subject lines. It's just, functionally how it gets out there.
That's interesting.
I would add just one other thing, and that is that there was somebody that ran last time that did put, I don't know how many cracks in the ceiling, glass ceiling was it, that was, I think, obviously a credible candidate that did get, remind yourself that while the women that you mentioned are getting a lot of media attention, Hillary Clinton got a lot of votes.
Yeah, and also I just want to say another thing. I think it speaks to the state of New Hampshire, actually, that Congresswoman Bachmann has less chance than I do of winning the Republican primary.
Do we have further comments or questions? Okay, great. As we wrap up this panel, I want to ask, who among us is going to run for office? Who among us is going to start a grassroots campaign? Who among us is going to reach the media or start their own media? Who among us is going to withdraw their obedience? And please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.